I'm a scientist studying human mating, and today I'm going to explain why men like big butts. There are really three key things to understand here, the first of which is that we're really talking about fat. I know fat is a bad word in the Anglosphere, but one thing I want you to notice is that, ironically, the features that most men find most attractive on women's bodies are fat deposits. Large breasts, large hips, large thighs, today's topic, a large rear end. People might say fat is unattractive, but they're really only talking about some fat when they say this. So the question for today is, why is this fat, gluteofemoral fat on the rear end, considered so attractive, whereas fat in the armpit or the stomach or under the neck is not? Now, I should note that it's true that a large bottom also contains muscle. And that might be part of the selective story here, right? Maybe part of this is selection for large glutes, athleticism in mates. But usually when building glutes works as a means of beautification, it's usually because it pushes the body fat out to make it appear more copious, not because men are necessarily finding the muscle itself desirable, or so it seems. And that actually brings us to the second key item, which is that sometimes some men do in fact find fat in general to be desirable, and these men can teach us something very interesting about our evolved psychology. A variety of data show that when men are experiencing poverty or instability, they prefer larger women. There are experimental studies showing that men prefer heavier women before dinner compared to after dinner. There is anthropological literature showing that women in some cultures, such as the Efik of southern Nigeria, restrict movement and increase calories as a means of beautification. There's even paleoanthropological literature showing Venus figurines becoming more obese in regions of glacial stress in Europe. So there's a suite of studies here, all converging on the same theme, but what explains them? Why would men prefer women with more body fat during times of hardship? Well, a common theory related to the overarching insurance hypothesis is that if there is a famine, it would be adaptive for men's preferences to shift towards women who have more stored calories, right? That's what fat is. A woman with copious body fat is far less likely to experience infertility or starvation due to famine or other sources of resource insecurity. And they're also, frankly, far more likely to be able to feed you, right? They probably know where the yams are. And so I think one could safely expect from this literature that larger bottoms would be more attractive to men who have experienced resource insecurity, especially food insecurity, since these men would benefit the most from selecting a woman with more stored fat. Now, I know what you're thinking, Mackin, even in wealthy cultures and contexts where men don't have food insecurity issues, they still prefer women with relatively fat butts, right? That is fat relative to the rest of their body. Why would that be the case? Well, hear me out. It's gonna sound quite wacky. This is the third thing you've been waiting for. It's probably because it's good for infant brain development. Gluteofemoral fat is rich in long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids that are essential for infant brain health and development. And during pregnancy, this fat is mobilized to support the developing fetus's brain. And anecdotally, you will hear women talk about this, right? I lost my butt during pregnancy. So the theory put forward by Lasik and Gollin goes like this. Men who preferred women with larger butts were more likely to reproduce with women who had more of this long-chain polyunsaturated fatty acids on their rear end. And women with more of these healthy fats were more likely to have babies who had healthier brain development. And babies with healthier brain development were more likely to survive and reproduce and pass on their father's preference for large bottoms. This preference plausibly explains how a preference for fatter bottoms could have proliferated and obtained its robust place in men's evolved psychology today. Anyway, thank you for listening. If you're a woman listening and you don't have a large butt, don't stress about it. Men's preferences are very diverse. This isn't even a universal preference. And even men who have this preference, they generally factor in far more things as part of their selective process when choosing a life partner. Until next time.